Today's Bible reading comes from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 5, verse 8 to chapter 6, verse 12. Verse 8. If you see the poor oppressed in the district, and justice and rights denied, do not be surprised at such things. For one official is eyed by a higher one, and over them both are others higher still. The increase from the land is taken by all. The king himself profits from the fields. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with the income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefits are they to the owners, except to feast their eyes on them? The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. I have seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owners, or wealth lost through some misfortune, so that when they have children, there is nothing left for them to inherit. Everyone comes naked from the mother's womb, and as everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil that they can carry in their hands. This too is a grievous evil. As everyone comes, so they depart. And what do they gain, since they toil for the wind? All their days they eat in darkness, with great frustration, affliction, and anger. This is what I have observed to be good, that it is appropriate for a person to eat, to drink, and to find satisfaction in the toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given them, for this is their lot. Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions, and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. They seldom reflect on the days of their life, because God keeps them occupied with gladness of heart. Chapter 6. I have seen another evil under the sun, and it weighs heavily on mankind. God gives some people wealth, possessions, and honor, so that they lack nothing their hearts desire. But God does not grant them the ability to enjoy them, and strangers enjoy them instead. This is meaningless, a grievous evil. A man may have 100 children and live many years, yet no matter how long he lives, if he cannot enjoy his prosperity and does not receive proper burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. It comes without meaning. It departs in darkness, and in darkness its name is shrouded. Though it never saw the sun or knew anything, it has more rest than does that man. Even if he lives 1,000 years twice over, but fails to enjoy his prosperity, do not all go to the same place? Everyone's toil is for their mouth, yet the appetite is never satisfied. What advantage have the wise over fools? What do the poor gain by knowing how to conduct themselves before others? Better what the eye sees than the roving of the appetite. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Whatever exists has already been named, and what humanity is has been known. No one can contend with someone who is stronger. The more the words, the less the meaning, and how does that profit anyone? For who knows what is good for a person in life, during the few and meaningless days that pass through like a shadow? Who can tell them what will happen under the sun after they are gone? This is the word of the Lord.
Can't hear anything. Good? It's great, it's sunny. I see the sun. I've been stuck in bed for the last week. I've had the flu, so this is my first day out, and it's great just being out in the sun. Let me pray and then we'll dive into the passage. Father, Lord, this section of Scripture strikes very hard at us. It strikes at the topic of wealth and, Father, labour, work, how we manage these things. Lord, help me be clear, help me be encouraging. And Father, Help me learn as I preach this as well. Lord Father, give us hearts that are wide open to what you are saying and influence for good. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen. Are you content with life? Are you content with life? Because that's what Ecclesiastes 5, 8 to 6:12 is saying. Are you content with life? And the way we're going to handle this is we're not going through it verse by verse because it's too big. Dallas needs a clap for getting through it all. It is a really big passage. So I want us to think like a Hebrew or like a Greek person. Okay, what do I mean by that? When you were growing up, when you were in primary school, how did you highlight something when you were writing or reading? When I was growing up, I'd get a ruler and a pen. Nowadays, I'd get a highlighter. What happens in Hebrew and Greek thought, and in many other languages, they set stuff off one against another. So, if you've got 3 paragraphs, the middle paragraph is the most important, is the thing that needs highlighting. Technically, this is called a chiasm, and you've got in the middle the most important thing, which is 5:18 to 20. And on each side, you've got these big paragraphs, which have similar themes, so we can group them together. So the way I'm going through it is how it's set out on your sheet. That there's 3 points, but the last point is the most important point to get out of it. The other points are to show that point 3 is the most important point. Having said that, I'll jump in. I want to tell you a story, and some of you might know this guy, some of you may not. At age 45, Howard Hughes was one of the most glamorous men in America. He dated actresses, piloted aircraft, and worked on top secret CIA contracts, owned a string of hotels, and even an airline. And some of you are saying, that would be great. Well, let's go ahead 20 years. At 65, Howard Hughes had still plenty of money. He was the richest man in the world. This was some time ago. But the world's richest man wasn't living a glorious life. He had become pathetic. He lived in a small dark room in the top of one of his many hotels, without sun and without any joy at all. He was unkempt, a scraggly guy with a long beard and hair that went down to his waist. He was once 6'4", a well-built physique. He had now shrunk to 100 pounds, which is less than me. I'm about 115. So, he must have been straggly. This famous man spent most of his time watching TV, or in modern terms, Netflix. He lay naked in his bed, deathly afraid of germs. Sounds like COVID. His life had no meaning at all. Finally, wasting away, hooked on drugs, he died 2 years later for a lack of a medical device one of his own companies had developed. Is that the way life's supposed to be lived? I don't think so, and neither does the writing of Ecclesiastes. Having read about Howard Hughes, we have to ask ourselves, did he live the good life? Many of us would want the trappings that he had. I would want to be a CIA agent. I would want to pilot planes. I would love an unlimited finances. Imagine what you could do, the good, the bad, and the not so good. But Is this what Ecclesiastes is saying? This morning, as we look at Ecclesiastes, we will see that the satisfaction or joy in life is found in another place. And this joy releases people from the grind of working and greed it may promote. Instead, the people of God are to be content, rather than always striving for material things in the world. Having explored these things, we'll focus in on point 3, the most important thing in this passage. I don't know about you, but under point 1, if you're following, I started reading this and I thought, what the heck does oppression of the poor have to do with money? And then I realised it was saying something that we always see in life. It's not saying, I see this and fix it. It's making an observation. The writer of Ecclesiastes sees this and he sets the passage up with this because it's universal. We've all heard stories of people being fleeced by the government. And this is what Ecclesiastes is saying. He says, because of bureaucracy works like this, especially when it oppresses the poor. One person will take a little bit. The second person up, the next tier up, will take a little bit, and the guy up the top will take a bit. But is this what life is supposed to be? No. The issue here is the problem of wealth, the problem of money. We've all got it, haven't we? We want so much. We want so much in our lives. We want to do so much. And to do those things, we need money to fund it. And this is what Ecclesiastes is saying. If you look, I'll try to give verses as I go through. So if you look at 5:10, some see money as a god. We all know people like that, don't we? They love money. They make sacrifices for it and think that it can do anything. Their minds are filled with thoughts of how to get more money. And their lives are controlled by it, guarding it. They experience great sense of security when they have it. We see this especially with those who are nearing retirement, don't we? Or those who are on minimal wages, that they strive to amass enough to live the next week or go on a holiday. And they want to make it secure. So one day when they normally retire, at least they have some funding. Because to live on a government pension is not good. It's only, I think, 25,000 or something, where mine is super, so it's about twice that. But people strive for these things. But money can never satisfy, can it? Because the more we've got, the more we want. Jesus says the same thing. He says, take heed, beware of covetousness. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions, Luke 12. First, a person loves money, then they love more money, and they love more money and more money. It's like a disease. Paul says in 1 Timothy, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Not that money is evil. Money's not evil. Money's a neutral thing that we can use for good or bad. We can use it to fund people overseas. We can use it to go on holidays, which we need. We can use it for our families. Later in the passage, we'll see that God is a generous God. So with money, we can be generous or we can hoard it. So if money's not the problem, What is the problem? The problem is hoarding money or getting more of it and more of it. But we know that even if you have lots of it, it creates more problems, doesn't it? My mum won the lottery about 30, 40 years ago, and rather than spend it, she put it all in a bank account, and then that was part of the kids' inheritance. She could have spent it, but if she spent it, opened her purse, she had relatives who would like to know her because they could probably get some money. So having lots of money sometimes brings new problems that we don't even imagine. In 5:12, money or wealth does not bring peace of mind. Some people obsess over wealth, don't they? They can't sleep because their primary purpose in life is guiding and securing the wealth. I have a friend who used to be in the share market, and all his life, he's a Christian, but all his life up to one point was geared on making enough money. And then he left there, went to Bible college and never looked back. In 5:12, it says, "A sleep of a labourer is sweet, whether they eat much or little. But as for the rich, their abundance permits no sleep." They're being kept awake by insomnia. Now, I sometimes suffer from insomnia, but it's not to do with wealth. It may be sometimes I've got a little bit of anxiety, or I just can't sleep, or I've eaten the wrong thing. But these people are being kept awake by their wealth. Since work is directly linked to work, what does the preacher say about work? The preacher says, "So I hate the life, for work under the sun was grievous to me. All of it was meaningless, chasing after wind." He views work like this: a person stuck on a daily grind. Have you ever felt like that? I have. I mean, the most satisfying job I only had for a year, and that was down at university working in medical research. And then I went to an office job. For the first 6 months or 3 months, I thought, wow, I've got some money. And then it was a drudge all my life. How do you look at work? I mean, there's periods that you're so excited about it, but normally it's just a daily drudge to get through. And that's what the writer to Ecclesiastes says. You need to work to eat, and if you don't work, you don't eat. And that's his whole problem with it. Not that work isn't fulfilling sometimes in itself, because it is. And what do you do if you don't work? I've got friends who don't work, who are on JobKeeper, but they're still working. They don't work for a living. The living's provided by the government. If you look up work in the dictionary, it says the first definition doesn't mention anything about getting wages. It says about putting all your effort in for an aim in life. Okay, so I can work for nothing, but I'm still working. But according to Ecclesiastes, he sees work as linked to wages, which is, most people go through that. And he's saying, well, maybe that's not the best way. Our appetite for things is never satisfied, is it? 6 verse 7. Our problem is limited financial resources and unlimited wants. And in the end, that is meaningless. 6 verse 10. Work and wealth will not always give us what we seek. Our desire is out of bounds. At this point, I want to tell you about a concept, and you might have heard this before. You may have not heard it before. What's the difference between joy and happiness? What's the difference between joy and happiness? Happiness is being happy upon getting something. So I can be happy because I've attained a goal. When I was 8, what made me happy was saving up for my next new toy car. But 2 weeks after, what did I want? I wanted a new toy car. And we're all like that, aren't we? We set a goal, we achieve it, and right after we get it, we think, well, what makes me happy now? Joy isn't like that. Joy is an inward constant. Like scientific constants, they don't differ. So like the speed of light, it doesn't differ. And joy is found as an intense happiness in your heart. The joy of living, according to Ecclesiastes, isn't wealth. It is a relationship with Jesus, or a relationship with God. What makes us happy? Several things. Family and other things. Money, yes. But what is joyful is in the heart. If you look at this passage, the underlying thing is contentment. Are we content? Are we content in our lot in life? Second thing, the evil of people. There is an evil of people not enjoying life. We are made for joy, but it escapes us all the time. He mentions in 5:16, 6:2 and in 6:1, it is evil. It is evil. And that is viewed as life apart from God under the sun. As if God were not interested in us. He shows this by 2 stories. The first story is the person who is wealthy but loses everything and finds no joy in 5:13. There are so many ways we can lose our wealth, aren't there? The person in this passage may have hoarded his wealth, like the rich young fool, but unlike the rich young fool who bought barns and hoarded his wealth, died, this guy didn't, or he may have later. You could lose your wealth through a bad venture. You could lose your wealth by a bad investment. Lots of people have invested and then it's gone bankrupt, a bank failure, being conned or in a war or a recession. And doing this, there is no satisfaction in life, is there? We all know people who have lost things through no fault of their own. So, what's he saying? In Australia, we joke about spending the kids' inheritance. But for a Jew in ancient Israel, this was a significant loss. No inheritance to pass along to the kids was something to be shameful for. In 5:13 and 14, all his lifetime to build up this wealth, and it's gone. He can't pass it on. Love of money had so impacted this man's soul that he is worried about it even after he's lost it. Who would want to end up like him? The second story is more tragic in 6:1-6. God has richly blessed this man, many children and a long life. Both these things were sought for and desired by the people of Israel. But they didn't happen. Why? Because he didn't get a proper burial. And in the end, the writer says He's like a stillborn child who is better. And if we consider stillborn child, that brings horrible thoughts to us, doesn't it? But this is why the writer was so appalled. He considers a child or this person, the unborn child, as better than this person. Even with a long life and many children and wealth, this means nothing at all. Joy is far away. Sure, wealth can make you happy, but in the end, where's your joy? Why does God withhold joy from one person and not give it to another? Was it because the person had worked hard and seemed to enjoy it? Or was it because God did not have the right to withhold it from them? Are we entitled to the joys of our wealth? Our problem is that we believe the lie that we're all told. Money buys everything and it makes us happy. We are feeding ourselves a message that money does satisfy us, but it is not joy. Even if we achieve this doesn't equal joy. So, what is joy? Point 3, a joyful life. The writer does not believe that life is very enjoyable. He's very pessimistic up to this point, but he is trying to help us enjoy it while we can. He tells us to eat, drink, work, for tomorrow we die. And that's a recurring theme through Ecclesiastes. If you do nothing else, do these things. But is that all the preacher says? I don't think so. He's giving us a balanced view of what life is like. If you read those verses 5:18 to 19, you see several things. And several things will strike you as if a car strikes a kangaroo in outback Australia. In 5:18 to 20, do you notice something? He mentions God 4 or 5 times. There is no mention of God in either passage, either side of it. So this makes it stand out all the more to us. But more than that, what does he say? He says that God is a generous God. If you look at passages either side, all those people weren't generous in what they did. So it intensifies it. Whatever enjoyment he finds is God-centered. Without God, life is meaningless, is miserable, especially if we are living for money. But when we know the God of joy, even money can be a blessing. Earlier, the preacher listed many of these reasons why accumulating money is vanity. Do you know what vanity is? Something that's not there. And the best illustration I've heard so far this week, have you ever been shopping when they used to have plastic bags? And the wind would come up and drag the plastic bag away from you. And you launch out to try and get it, and you never get it. That's what he's talking about. You reach out from something and you never get it. God gives gifts to people. And God gives gifts of wealth and work. And he also gives other gifts which aren't mentioned in this passage. Of family, of support, of people who get alongside. But they all come from God. If you noticed with Howard Hughes, that story I started with, he wasn't generous, his life wasn't centered on God. At the end, he had no person to support him. So what do we do? What do we do? As I finished the sermon this morning in the 9 o'clock congregation, I drew people's attention to a verse. And I remember this, it's from the King James Version. And I've remembered it. And it says, people cannot serve both God and mammon. Mammon means not only wealth, but anything that comes from wealth. The challenge to you and to me today is, what do we worship? Because this is what Ecclesiastes is saying. What do we worship? Do we worship God, or do we worship money, wealth, labour? Ecclesiastes comes down very hard, saying that life is only worth living with complete joy if you centre your life upon God. And yes, God does give generous gifts to us. Why? Because he wants us to enjoy it. And time again, that is brought out in Ecclesiastes, where he says, drink, eat, for tomorrow we die. So what will you do now? I hope, like you, I will go home and think about more constructively how to get my life in tune with God, to have the deep, lasting joy in my heart, rather than following things which can't be caught. Let me pray.